Hey, Cohesive Homies, welcome to another episode in our interview series. One of the ways we believe we can inspire you is by sharing stories from people within our community who are wholeheartedly living life by their values. On today's episode, Melissa interviews Larisa Barth, mother, entrepreneur, creative, and minimalist. I believe that her story will deeply resonate with you as she shares how she set a new course after tragedy and ultimately guided her family in a new direction that better reflects their values. I hope Melissa's conversation with Larisa inspires and encourages you as much as it did for me. Larisa, thank you so much for joining me today on Cohesive Home Podcast. I'm really excited to share your story with our community, mostly because you're part of our community and you have an awesome story. So if you want, do you just want to kind of jump right in and tell us just a little bit of your backstory and who you are?
All right. Sounds great. I am super excited to be here with you guys too. And this community has been awesome. And I'm really excited that there's online support like this, and have really gotten into podcast listening lately. So that's been awesome. My name is Larisa. My husband is Jim, and we live in Wyoming, northwestern Wyoming, kind of between Yellowstone and Mount Rushmore. And we have Kamari, who is 4.5, and then my son Judah is 22 months old this week, so almost 2. And we've been west for 8 years now. We moved here to Montana from Pennsylvania. So we're originally East Coasters. My husband went to school in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Amish country in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
Oh, my mom was born in Lancaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I lived there for 5 years as a kid. Yeah, I love Pennsylvania. Sorry, go ahead.
Born and raised.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's where we met, and we were in youth ministry for 2 years before we moved west. So I always say that there's that very popular phrase, the mountains are calling and I must go. And that is truly kind of what happened to us. And we were on mission trips out west during our youth ministry years, and my husband Jim proposed to me on top of a mountain right outside of Glacier National Park.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then we went back and lived there for 5 years as missionaries. So it's been kind of cool to live west. It's kind of been a huge part of who we are, because we've been married almost 11 years, and we're going on 9 years of being out west, and all of our family is back east. So
awesome. Yeah. So can you pinpoint a moment when, other than the mountains calling you guys, I mean, was there a specific reason why you moved out there?
Well, the mission that we were working at, we went 3 different times. So my husband actually, as a 14-year-old, was on the mission trip to the same place in Montana. And then we went back when we were engaged and led another team back as a married couple. And so when my husband graduated from seminary, he's a pastor. And so he had his Master of Divinity, and we were working with the United Methodist Church, and there was the mission out there. We kind of said, would it be really cool to move west and to see if there's an opening out there? So we looked it up, but my husband thought I was crazy. I mean, all our family's in Pennsylvania. So we contacted the pastor that was there at the time, and they said, we're actually leaving. So my husband applied for it, and they told us no. They said, it's too secluded. It's too much in the middle of nowhere. You guys wouldn't survive out here. And we were like, well, let us be the judge of that. And I think they thought we were coming from like the East Coast and a little bit more. I mean, it's country in Lancaster County, but there's still a lot. There's a lot of shopping. There's a lot of traffic. And so he said, I'm not taking no for an answer. And I had already started packing up our apartment that we were living in, and he just kind of waited to hear. We were ready to go. And I think our backup plan was to be missionaries in another country. I've done some traveling in India. I was a missionary in India. I've been to Israel. So we kind of have passion for missions. No, it's just somewhere. And So he didn't take no for an answer, and we took 2,500-mile trek and moved everything that we had in one trailer out west and made it to Browning, Montana on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation.
Wow. Wow, that is so cool. So was it secluded? Were you
Yeah,
guys ready for that?
we were because my husband is my best friend, and so we didn't really feel like we were leaving, other than our family, we weren't leaving a huge social life in Pennsylvania. And so we really quickly made friends with a lot of the locals, and amazingly enough, we were kind of adopted into the community, which it's hard. You have to build up a lot of trust, but we loved the Native American culture. We loved the wide open spaces in Big Sky Country. We had the connection already from being there before, and so we knew some people. And I think they really loved the fact that we fought to be there, that we wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And so the sense of community, it was really, I know it's a modern term now that people throw around that's kind of trendy, but it was our tribe, like quite literally.
Yeah.
It was just our tribe, and we had a lot of connections there. And so we did accumulate a lot of things living there, though, because we had 325-acre ranch that was part of the mission. So that's where the parsonage was. So parsonage is the housing that's provided for the pastor. So there was 3 outbuildings. There was a 2-car garage. There was a rec room. We had a bunkhouse. So we were able to accumulate a lot of things living there. It was a 4-bedroom house, and we got a lot of winter gear because it gets very cold there. We learned to live like shopping once a month. So we stocked up. We did Costco. For 5 years, I shopped once a month. We didn't have a Walmart in our town. We didn't even have McDonald's. So it was a learning experience for us because I had to learn to plan meals for a month in advance. But it was just us for almost 3 years. And so I got pregnant with my son Asher in Montana, and I went gung ho. They had a baby shower for us. I had the entire nursery done with monkeys and everything. I mean, this was my first child, and we had been married for 5 years, so we were waiting for this baby to come. And family drove out to see us while I was pregnant. Some family came for the baby shower. They would fly out to be a part of our life out there. And I was teaching, I was coaching. Everyone was really involved in this pregnancy and in our son. And I think it was the day before I was 40 weeks. So I was going to go into labor at any point, and I had to drive 2 hours to the closest hospital. So the Blackfeet Reservation, there's a hospital, but because we aren't tribal members, he couldn't be born there. So we had to go across the mountains and cross the mountain passes, and it was October, but the snow hadn't fallen yet. So I was able to drive over there. I stopped by the school and told my girls that I was coaching at the time that I was like, I think that he's coming. So we're going to go over a while. We had the car seat loaded up and drove over, and they hooked me up. I was in labor. I was having contractions, but when they hooked up the monitor, they couldn't find his heartbeat. And so that moment really was a huge shocker for us because we weren't really prepared. Like our life kind of had been going the way we wanted it to up until that point. And so Asher was born on his due date, October 9th, and he was not breathing. So they consider that stillborn. And so that a lot of people came to his funeral. A lot of people on the reservation were, it really bonded us to them, I think, because we buried him there and we stayed, and we didn't leave. We didn't rush back to Pennsylvania. Even that moment happened. So, but I think that created a fear in me that I kept his nursery, everything the same. I didn't want to get rid of anything because that was that was the memory that I had of him, even though he was buried there. And so,
so that event in your life, though, that sort of prompted you to create a nonprofit, right?
Yeah. So coming back to the nursery without your baby, and having to go back to a life that isn't the one you were preparing for, I lost my future. I lost my dreams and my hopes. And so I remember telling my husband in the hospital when I was in having to give birth to Asher, I said, I'm never doing this again. Like, there's no way I'm ever going to go through a pregnancy. Like, in that moment, I knew that I couldn't do this. And I said, it's just going to have to be you and me. And I'm sorry, but I will not carry another baby. And so I went back and had about a month of time to just kind of revamp, realize what I was going to do now that I wasn't a mom. At least in my mind, I wasn't a mom now. And so I went back to work and went back to coaching. But I had those mothering instincts, things that people don't even realize. Like, my baby wasn't here, but my breast milk came in and I had no baby to nurse. And so they would say, well, your body doesn't know that your baby isn't here. When I felt like I was grief stricken. I was run down. I couldn't hardly breathe. How could my body not know? So I felt like my body betrayed me and I needed to do something to just kind of mother him. And so there's a lot of research, behind ways to help grieving moms, brothers, sisters. And it's a lot of work with your hands, whether it's gardening or pottery or sewing. And so I went to jewelry, to making things with my hands. And so we founded in December, so 2 months after Asher died, we founded Held Your Whole Life. And it came from a letter that I read to him at his funeral. And it was just, I felt like I gave birth to him 2 hours away from where everyone was that loved us and knew us. And so they all wanted to know, like, how was I during that time? They were at his funeral and they got to see him and they got to be there when we buried him, but they wanted to know how I was doing. And so I read this letter that I wrote to Asher, just talking about how he never had to experience pain and suffering because he was held his whole life in my womb. And so I found comfort in that. And so that's where the words came from for the nonprofit. And we searched all over for a tangible piece to kind of hold close. We had the empty nursery, we had all the baby stuff, but that was kind of just locked in a room that we didn't look at. And so I wanted jewelry, and it kind of grew out of that. We were able to get pieces made with Asher's handprint from the funeral home, but they were like $500. And if it wasn't for people helping get those for us, we never could have gotten them. So I wanted to do something that would be a way for families to get them at no cost, because we were already paying for a funeral and a tombstone and all of these things that you don't expect to pay for. And so we started that in December. And in almost 6 years' time, we have done over 10,000 free pieces of jewelry for moms and dads who've lost a baby. And they always say Held Your Whole Life on them, and we would put the baby's name and their birth date as a way to acknowledge their life. Because when they're held their whole life in the womb and they don't take a breath of air, they're not usually acknowledged. So when Asher was born, my husband actually said, so what about his birth certificate? And they said, well, he didn't take a breath of air. He doesn't get a birth certificate. So we were given a death certificate, but not a birth certificate. And so it's just kind of, that's such a blow. We're like, well, 40 weeks, he was a full-term baby. We had everything ready for him. We have a right to acknowledge that he lived. And so that's where Held Your Whole Life was born from. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing to hear that story, but also knowing that you were able to help so many other grieving families. I think that is something that gives you purpose even in pain. And I think that's amazing. So, how does that all tie in with the life you're living now? Because I know that you've moved and now you're much more minimalistic in the way that you do things. Obviously, you're a part of our community, so you have a simple living, as your thing. So how did that kind of change? You've got this nonprofit, you're busy, I'm sure, keeping active with your business and with your with the jewelry business, and then also, are you still coaching as well?
No. So we were in Montana for 5 years, and then we got moved to Wyoming for my husband's job. So he's a pastor in the United Methodist Church, and after 5 years in Montana, they asked us if we would move to Powell, Wyoming. And it's kind of a hard system. It's kind of like being in the military. That's really the only other way I know to describe it. The bishop kind of appoints you where they feel would be a good fit for you. But it was really a shock for us because we didn't ask to leave our appointment in Browning. And so when they asked us to go, my husband was like, let's just assume that this is where we're being called to go. And it was really hard because Asher was buried on the land on the Blackfeet Reservation. But in the meantime, I had our rainbow baby, which her name is Kamari, mourning, and she was about 1.5 years. And the only way I survived her pregnancy was through making jewelry. I mean, I probably did 2,000 pieces to give to families all over the world. At that point, we were shipping internationally as well. And because I'd never had a baby that had been born alive, that I had gotten to hear cry, I really didn't know what that was like. And so my following pregnancy then was kind of, I had to just get through it. And so I was able to do that by continuing to work with my hands, but it grew so much during that time that when she was born, I was working like 50 hours a week, working on Held Your Whole Life. Like, it just consumed me. And, you're giving something for free. So besides that, 1 in 4 pregnancies, the baby doesn't come home with the mom. So it's a large community. The baby loss community is really large. And so I was focusing a lot on that, and we got moved. And so my board was in Montana. That had to kind of get switched up. And so we got to Powell, and they didn't have a parsonage. So we bought our first house. And at that point, after living 5 years on the reservation in that isolation, I kind of had developed this mentality that we have been through a lot of crap in our life. And so we deserve to live in joy now. And so we had our rainbow baby finally. We got 3 U-Hauls. Like, we took a truck U-Haul. We had a trailer on the back of my husband's truck, and we had to get another trailer. We had friends driving our 3 vehicles down to Wyoming. It was like an 8-hour drive. And we got there and we bought our American dream house. And I thought that's what I wanted. And I thought like I had come full circle. I mean, I truly had this, even though I know that bad things can continue to happen, I really felt like we have survived this loss. We are moving. It's a fresh start. We're going to get this house that has granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and a beautiful manicured lawn. And so we purchased that. And within 3 months, I was pregnant again. And was still doing Held Your Whole Life a lot. Like, I have a lot of equipment that comes with that organization. We were then an officially not a nonprofit. So I had just paperwork and my workshop. I had a whole room in the house just for my workshop, and bubble mailers and jewelry boxes. It was just so much clutter. Like, I didn't even really like being in my workshop. And if Amari came into the workshop and like took apart boxes, I would get so frustrated. Like, it was really hard to be a mom and also run a nonprofit at home. And so when I was pregnant, this was with Ember. And it was pretty early on in my pregnancy that we looked at another silent ultrasound screen, and they told me that I was going to miscarry. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I hadn't carried Ember all the way to term, but it was a different kind of a grief. I didn't have a baby to bury. I didn't have as many of the dreams maybe. But the fact that we were going through another loss of a baby, it just really made us realize that that this, like, I don't know, the life is so fleeting, and that you don't have any control over anything. And so we chose to live then with really no savings. We wanted to just take adventures. We didn't really want to have a huge amount in our savings account. So we started doing more trips and more camping trips and more backpacking and hiking and just being outside with Kamari. And 3 months later, I was pregnant with Judah. And so he's now 22 months old, but,
awesome.
So I guess I thought at that point then that we had a boy and a girl. We had our big house, and it was 1,800 square feet. And when we moved there, I felt like we needed a lot of stuff that we didn't already. I mean, we brought 3 U-Hauls, and yet I felt like, because it was a new place, I felt like
Yeah.
we needed to have all of this extra stuff. And so we wanted a guest room. So we bought an extra queen size bed, and we had a backyard in Browning. We were on a ranch and it was really dry and there was gopher holes everywhere and nothing survived the wind. So I didn't have any outdoor stuff. So like I bought a patio set and we bought a Weber grill and we bought kids stuff like a playhouse and a sandbox and all of these things that you think you need. And like I needed curtains in every room. And oh my goodness, we spent so much money trying to get this house the way it's supposed to look. Um, and then with homeownership also comes all of the roof is leaking or the air conditioning isn't working right or we need a new furnace. And so we were quickly getting sucked into just the overwhelming feeling of homeownership. And then also my work with Held Your Whole Life was just becoming overwhelming. And so I think that there was one point where Jim came home from work and he would be gone a lot for meetings at church. I think the church can sometimes, I mean, it's his job. So for us, ministry and going to church, when we were on the reservation, we did it together and it was a little bit different. It was more of a mission appointment. Whereas now he was like the senior pastor. He had 2 churches in Wyoming that he was over. And so it took a lot of time. And so when he would come home, instead of just getting to be with us, he was having to trim bushes and, edge the lawn and work on the furnace or be in the garage trying to clean the garage. And it was that was our life when we thought we were living the American dream, or when we were living the dream that media kind of puts out there for us.
Yeah.
So we got to a place where we were both really unhappy.
And tired, I bet.
Yeah.
I'm a little worn out just hearing about it. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and another pregnancy in between there.
Yeah.
And most of our babies that are living and are here with us on Earth, they are miracles. I've had to go through injections in my stomach twice a day of blood thinners for all of my babies that are here, and stuff that we didn't find out until after Asher died. So it kind of made life after Asher has been a lot more. We're just more aware. We're not naive at all. We have more fears maybe too. I'm afraid of Kamari going to any babysitter, so my husband and I weren't getting date nights, and then Judah comes along and I had to have another C-section. And so my recovery was hard, and yeah, life was crazy and busy, and Held Your Whole Life hung over me during all of that time. Because here are thousands of people, of moms and dads who are grieving and who are waiting on me to give them something. And so it started to get to be really stressful for me and for my family and for my marriage.
Yeah. So that was, about the breaking point, I would guess. What were some of the first steps that you took to kind of achieve the life that you guys are living now?
Well, I don't know if it's okay to say book names in here, but I picked up Marie Kondo's book, and started. That was my first kind of clue that maybe my things are tied to me more than I want them to be. And even so, almost 5 years after Asher was born, I was having nightmares about what I would grab in a fire that was his. Because I had like the ID tag that they had put on his ankle, and I had footprints, I have his handprint tattooed on my arm. My husband and I both have it. Like that's his actual handprint. The first tattoo either of us had ever gotten. So I don't know why that those things were just tied to me so much. And so it was kind of at this point where we decided that time was more valuable. My husband needed to be with us and be present with us more. And so I looked in our front yard and I said, this perfectly green manicured yard that you're like spraying with weed killer and all of this, we should just rototill it up and plant a garden. Like, why are we spending time and money on something that isn't benefiting us? But it was like the pressure of being in a cul-de-sac with neighbors who all were paying for, the weed guys to come out and spray it. Like, what would they think? And so I kind of had this, I wanted to be different. I wanted to break free. I wanted to make change for our family that was here and now, instead of spending so much time and energy on the mission that I had started to honor Asher. And so when we read Marie Kondo's book, we started going through clothing, and we had a huge bedroom set. And I think we counted up at one point, we had 17 drawers. So between like my hutch and his dresser, and then we had a walk-in closet, and then our bed was a platform bed. So there was 6 drawers on either side of the platform bed.
Wow. Wow.
So much. And
Yeah.
just that little thing in the back of my mind to hold something and say, no, I don't get any joy from this, and put aside, well, Jim bought this for me for Valentine's Day, but my mom gave this to me and she's going to be mad if she doesn't see me wear it. I finally just was able to take 3 van loads of stuff to donate. And our church had a little thrift store, and they would do free days and things. So we were able to take it there and felt like it was going to a good cause, and got rid of so much that way. And that kind of was the starting point for us. And just doing that, we were able to then sell our whole bedroom set. And we just bought a memory foam mattress that goes on a little platform. We got rid of our dressers. We went through all the kids' stuff. And that is when, we sold the crib, the only crib that we had bought for Asher that, was his one. I had hundreds of cards, all of the condolence cards. Like, I kept all of that stuff, but it was in a box, and it was something that I kept moving around and kept reorganizing around, and I never looked at them. They didn't have any meaning anymore. And so I think getting to a point where I realized that letting go of those things didn't mean that I was letting go of the memory. And wanting to be more present with my kids that were here, that we were able to give birth to. And so we decided in September of last year that we were going to sell our house, and that 1,800 square feet, at that point, my husband and I were going to marriage counseling because it was the only time that we could actually set aside to have a babysitter and make it happen. And my husband could get off of work for that hour so that we could go. And I wouldn't say that we were in crisis mode, but we weren't communicating. And so he knew I was unhappy. He was working so much. I didn't really know where we were going as a family. And I think that he was so frustrated because he thought, I bought you the house you wanted. I bought you the house that made you cry when you walked in. Like, you live in this beautiful area. Like, I don't understand why you're unhappy. But it took that for me to realize that this isn't what I wanted. But I thought I wanted, because everybody tells you, like, do you have a grill? Do you have a mower? Do you have a flat screen TV? Do you have countertops and stainless steel appliances? All of these things. And but even though we had all of that in our house, we were just constantly doing work, constantly doing things to make it better. Or I was looking on Pinterest, and I need to have that rug, like, because Joanna Gaines' house has this rug, or whatever it was. That
I need the shiplap, all of the shiplap. I know, I can't lie, I really like the shiplap.
You know what? I painted the wood paneling in our house now, and it looks like shiplap.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
So we kind of stepped out in faith, and we decided to put our house on the market. And let me tell you, we got so much pushback. Like, our neighbors, our family, people in our church that were like, you're going to sell your house? What are you going to do? We're like, we're going to rent. Because we just feel like we're in transition stage right now, and we want to be in a place that doesn't have a yard, or at least if it does, the landlords are responsible for it and not us, so that we can have that extra time and just see what it feels like. And so we put our house on the market, and everyone told us, you're not going to have equity, and why would you go back to renting after you've owned? And like, we had to fight through a lot of that. And in order to put our house on the market, the realtor said, you got to get rid of some stuff. You have to get rid of more stuff and to kind of stage the house. And so we just sold. I mean, I was up like all night posting things to Facebook buy and sell groups, putting stuff in the yard and saying free, and just getting rid of things. And it was so great. I mean, we ended up selling our house before Thanksgiving, and we moved into 900 square foot apartment. So half the size, which was a big deal. I'm sure we could live in a tiny house, but for us to go from 1,800 square feet with a yard and a 2-car garage to a 900 square foot apartment that didn't have any yard. It had gravel out front, and it didn't have a basement, didn't have an attic. It didn't have any storage that was a pretty big deal to us. So we spent the last 6 months, all of this last winter, we were in that space. And I think what I always think about when I hear people talking about living in smaller spaces, I think that's awesome. And I think our living space is probably about 400 to 500 square feet. But when you are running a nonprofit or you're running a jewelry business, like I had to have a space for that.
Yeah.
So I had so much stuff that when we moved to the apartment, that was kind of the last straw. I thought, I'm tired of moving all of this around. And so really the kind of the trigger for me was that I heard the term, does it add value to your life?
Yeah.
I think I was listening to the Minimalist podcast or something. And I thought about it, and it was different than spark joy. Does it spark joy? Because I felt like the work I was doing for Held Your Whole Life, it was adding value to other people's lives. But when I stopped and thought about my own life and my family and my kids, I got no value from it. And so that made me kind of resent it. I was resenting this work that I was doing. And so, the last year I had been thinking about just stopping and quitting it all, but then it would have shut down. I would have had to dissolve it. Everything would have just fallen apart. And I had worked so hard to get it to this point. And so I had just been praying a lot about, like, God, if you want me to be done with this, like I'm really feeling a tug on my heart to be done with this, can you just make it like really, really clear? Because I've been to this place before where I wanted to just burn it all to the ground. You get sucked into this grief cycle, I felt, when I was working with the baby loss community. And so, there was a time where I had like 10,000 emails in my inbox, and they're all grandmas and fathers and sisters calling to say, my family member just lost a baby, and like, what can we do for them? What do we do to help them? What do we do? And so, besides the fact that I hate hearing that another baby died, and I wish that I could keep it from happening, it just, instead of my heart being softened toward those people, I was kind of just angry. Yeah. And so it was creating this person in me, like I didn't even want to respond to them. And so that wasn't fair to them and to the mission that I had created. And so it was just that phrase of sitting there one day and saying, this doesn't add value to my life. I have things that I want to do that will add value to my life. And so I called up my board. I sent them an email, I think, and I said, I need to be done. I don't really know what that means for the future of Held. And they all said back to me, like, you have done this so long. We are all in support of it. We'll just dissolve it. And I think it was the next day that this girl I met on Instagram and Facebook and through Held Your Whole Life, who had lost her twin daughters, she came to my mind. And I thought, you know what? She lives in Montana. She's not that far away. I've never really met her, but I'm going to call her and see if she just happens to have like any interest in this. And so to make a long story short, she took over Held Your Whole Life in June, May and June, we kind of did the transition. And so the mission will continue. And she finds incredible value in doing the same work that I was doing in honor of her twin daughters. And like, I get to kind of still see some of the emails and messages that she's sending to these moms, and her heart is in it. Like, it has served its purpose for my life. And I had to come to that realization, but it still had a purpose. And that was what was so hard for me with wanting to shut it down. Wanting to give up my work was like, I didn't want it to shut down, but I couldn't continue to do it. So it took a while to come to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love the way you said that, though. It served its purpose in your life. And I think that could be attached to so many things, whether that's a job you're doing or a physical thing that's in your home that you just can't let go of. You're like, okay, it served its purpose for me, so let's allow it to serve its purpose for someone else. And so I think that's so awesome that you're able to pass that on to someone that in turn was getting probably healing and joy from that. So that's awesome. Well, so you continued your jewelry business though, right?
Yes. So that Held Your Whole Life kind of got me into jewelry in general. And so part of kind of how I usually word it is I wanted to choose to live in the color instead of the black and white. We had 2 rainbow babies, which were so full of life and color, and I wanted to focus on them. And so, we were living on a single income. All that time I had volunteered and donated to Held Your Whole Life was amazing, but I never made a cent from it. So I want.
Wow. Okay. You didn't. Okay. I was thinking you were creating jewelry and selling it, but that was completely for the nonprofit. Wow. Okay. All right. Keep
Yes.
going. Sorry.
Well, because I was on the board, I was the president of the board. I couldn't be paid to run it. And so, that was part of the
Right.
thinking before when we had thought about like me resigning was maybe they could pay me to do it. But it's all funded by donations and I just couldn't, it was linked too much personally to my heart, to my son.
Right.
And so because of that, it put so much pressure on me. Like I have to do this for Asher. And so part of getting rid of those things like clothing, it's amazing how much it released my soul and my spirit and made me be able to have space to breathe and to be able to realize that like Asher he's not here in our family. And he doesn't look down from heaven and say, Mom, you need to keep doing this. You need to like do this for me. You need to keep my memory alive. Like he just wants me to be happy. He just wants me to enjoy being a mom to those that are here, my kids that are here. And so, I started focusing more on making an income from my jewelry business. And so I branched out and created Joy in the Morning, which comes from, so there's Psalm 35 says, though the sorrow lasts through the night, joy comes in the morning. And that is what we clung to. We read that verse at Asher's funeral. And so my daughter Kamari her middle name is Morning, and Kamari means moonlight. So, I was like, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on trying to make a little income to be able to stay home with my kids. I mean, I was staying home with them, but we were kind of sinking in debt from the house that we had to have. And so while we lived in this little apartment all winter, I really focused on building my personal jewelry business. And I do more minimal designs, like design. My tagline is Designs to Inspire Adventure. And my kids are the influence for that. Like I've got designs like Explorer and Trailblazer and ideas that come from us being out in the mountains. We spent a lot of time in Yellowstone while we lived in Powell because we were really close to the entrance to Yellowstone. We've lived in Glacier National Park. Now we live in the Bighorn Mountains. So we had to move just this summer. And so that was kind of when I gave up Held Your Whole Life. And in June, we moved into a parsonage in Sheridan, Wyoming. And I have an awesome workspace and I didn't have to move any of the nonprofit stuff. Like I have my desk and my personal jewelry stuff. And since we've moved here, the confirmation that has come that stepping down from Held Your Whole Life was the right thing to do has just been mind blowing. Like I think 2 days after I resigned and turned over like officially all the bank account stuff, all of the paperwork over to Jill who took over, I got like a wholesale order from a large Wyoming apparel company that wants to, like, I'm now on board as one of their jewelry, as their artisans. And it's like, this is what I wanted to focus on. I want to focus on jewelry that isn't necessarily memorial jewelry. And I mean, I know that it's a cycle. I know it's something you have to go through, but I don't wear my Held Your Whole Life necklace with Asher's name on it. I mean, I wear a mama bear necklace, or I wear a necklace with my kids' names on it. And so I didn't think I would ever get to that place, but I did. And I know in the moment it was really, really hard to focus on ever having joy in my heart again. But I've been able to, through giving away things and being freed from my stuff, I've been able to also kind of let Asher go, let Ember go, and be able to focus on the here and now. And that has really shown itself, I think, in the designs that I'm making now.
Here at Cohesive Home, we love to support our community. And so Larisa is giving our Cohesive Home listeners a 20% off discount code. You can see all of her designs at joyinthemorningdesigns.com and use promo code CohesiveHome at checkout. Now, back to the interview.
Part of minimalism journey for us, we've focused a lot more on our impact on the environment and just our time. So we don't go shopping for clothing. I've been making my kids' clothing. You guys mentioned one podcast about going paperless, having zero waste. And so we've made that switch. And yeah, I might do some more laundry, but I have time to do that now. And so now I am so much more joy-filled, I feel, being able to focus on the things that are benefiting my family in the here and now, and just being more present as a mom, as a wife. And I'm making jewelry that I love to do. Like, I hated the feeling that I had when I was making another necklace with a baby's name who had died. And there was a time when that really was meaningful to me. I was doing something to help comfort another mom or dad. But again, that served its purpose, and it was a part of my journey for that time. But it isn't anymore.
Wow. Well, so, I mean, your whole story is very encouraging, but do you have any, I don't know, little nuggets of wisdom or any advice to someone who's listening and they may, I don't know, have something that they can't let go of, or, I don't know, just anything. Do you have any encouragement for them to change their life's direction? I know your story is a bit of an evolution through the last few years, but do you have any advice for someone who might be listening?
Well, I love the book that you guys recommend on your website, The Joy of Less. And so Francine J., she describes minimalism towards the beginning of that book as, some people view it as like an emptiness, or you're having to give up things, or loss, and associate it with loss and deprivation. But then she challenges us to look at what it is instead of what it isn't, and that is space. And so as someone who has personally lived through complete loss, like I have survived the loss of my child, of having to bury my baby, like I know what that feels like. And minimalism is not that like deprivation and emptiness. It's that space. Being able to get rid of things has given us so much space. And so when you let your stuff take over, I feel like you lose control, and then you do have a real soulful emptiness. And so for us, living with less, it's really just not about physical possessions. I guess my encouragement would be, I have friends who look at our life now and look at our house, and they're like, it's just so peaceful. It's just so calming, but I don't know where to start. And I just couldn't get to that place. And of course, 3 moves for us that's helped a little bit, because you're forced to take everything out of the cupboards and stuff.
Yes, you're like, I purge it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have to put it back. So that's actually what Francine, like, that's what she recommends. Take everything out of the drawers and stuff. Well, I've had to do that more than once. And every time I have gotten rid of even more. When I thought I had gotten rid of everything, I had more to get rid of. But maybe not looking at it as just physical possessions. I would even say, like, starting with less social media or less TV, even less pressure on yourself to make big meals. Like, I love to cook, and I used to buy ingredients to make a recipe because I thought, like, my husband will love having this for dinner. And then I never used saffron again, or vanilla bean, or whatever it was. Yeah. So, like, less pressure on yourself. Just like last night we did hot dogs on the grill, and we don't even eat bread. So we didn't even have buns. Like, my kids just cut it up with ketchup and we just eat it with a salad. Like, that's simple. And I think that some of those things that might give you a clue to how freeing life with less, or a more simple life, can be. If you look at it as like a huge task, like I have to go through every room, it's going to be overwhelming, and then you won't just start. So for us, it started with downsizing to sell our house, but then it's been a year-long journey of becoming minimalists in every sense of the word. So we're more focused on our time, on every single moment of the day, on our impact on the environment, even the people we choose to surround ourselves with, which has helped us see where our money is going. So we're having more space when it comes to our money, and it's allowed us to continue to let go of things that aren't adding value to our life. And I think having a goal as a family, and where you want to be, is huge. And so maybe start there. Have a goal. Like, when you move into a house, if I'd be out buying stuff for a house if I didn't know what I wanted it to look like. Like, what was my end goal? What space do I want to live in? What should my sanctuary look like? And I need to know that before I just start setting it up to be our house. And so, I think that for my job and work, for encouragement for that, like, I was absolutely scared that it was going to be the wrong decision, because held your whole life. I mean, my husband supported me. We were both the founders, but he always says, like, this was your work. He didn't have the need to mother like I did. And so he grieved in a different way. And so held your whole life was my work. And he just always supported me in it, even though it was sometimes stressful on us. And so I knew if I stepped down, I was the one making that decision. So I thought, like, what if I make the wrong decision? Those that follow us won't understand. They're going to think that I don't love Asher or I've forgotten about him. Even my extended family, they're like, but Held Your Whole Life is Asher. Like, how can someone else run that? And that was hard. But, I feel like when Asher died, I thought I couldn't possibly go through pregnancy again. I couldn't know joy again. But here I am now. And it's every day. It's an everyday journey. And if you have a destination in sight of where you want to be and who you want to be, then you can take each day as it comes and take little steps forward instead of like looking at it all at once, because I wouldn't have my rainbow babies here if I had looked at just the fact that I couldn't take another step forward. So yeah, I think that's I know that's a lot, but encouragement just within your home. It led to starting in our home led to me resigning so that I could focus more on my home.
Yeah. It's got a ripple effect, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know a lot of people are going to get so much out of this. So, one last thing though, we need to know, how can our listeners connect with you and find you on Instagram or any of the social medias or website so they can see your jewelry? I will definitely link to all of these in the show notes, but why don't you just tell everybody where they can find you right now?
All right. So we, on Instagram, I'm Joy in the Morn, not morning, but just Joy in the Morn. I also have an Instagram that's our Wyo Life, WYO, and that's my personal one. If you want to just follow our camping adventures and life in Wyoming. I have an Etsy shop, and I'm actually in the process of switching to my own website for my jewelry, just because I've had a lot of wholesale inquiries. So hopefully that will expand a little bit. But if you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to see that. I don't have Facebook, mostly. Just that was one of the things I decided to give up about a year ago, and it's been really great. So just Instagram for me. And if you're touched at all by the story of Held Your Whole Life, Jill's doing an amazing job running that. And so that's just heldyourwholelife.com. And they also Facebook, Instagram, all of that. And you can go on and request a piece of memorial jewelry for free if you've lost a baby in the womb.
That's a wrap for today's interview with Larisa Barth. This week we are hosting a giveaway of a custom-made bracelet by Larisa that is stamped with the words, "Live Your Values." Head to our Instagram at @cohesive_home for more details, and good luck. We'll see you Friday with another Q&A. Thanks for listening.